I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. California Bureau of Real Estate number 009849009. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. I don't know how I feel about doing that whole number thing. I feel like it disrupts my flow. Maybe just because I've never done it. Maybe it's because since 2007 I've never done it. Anyway. Yeah. Welcome to it, folks. We're wrapping up another week. We're pondering the real estate ponderables. We have a few. I've got a ton, really. I mean, I could reach back. So many things tend to get lost in the shuffle as the days progress and more gets added to the list. I'm wondering if one day we should just do a purge, right? Just do a really long show and try to get through some of the more important stuff that is still important after things pass, but we'll see. And I'm debating whether or not, they always I get people who contact me and tell me what I need to do with my show because people do that. So, and early on, I had people tell me, "Oh, you need to be less controversial. You need to," and I think I'm less controversial now, to be honest. I'm not sure. I don't think I actually made a decision to be less controversial. I think just sort of things shifted to sort of focusing on what are things happening that I'm seeing in the world that affect the world of real estate. It kind of evolved into that. But when I still say things that frustrate the hell out of me, I talk about them. I've got a couple saved up that I'm going to share. I'm a little bit superstitious in that I don't like to share things about an escrow until that escrow closes. So I got a couple of great ones for you. But I've thought, this is an election year, and does it make much sense for me to just remain absolutely silent? Now, I think I already did a why Trump shouldn't be your selection kind of guy. And I got some, actually most of the responses I got from that were not beat me up style. They weren't. Some folks wanted more information on why I came to that conclusion. I mean, I shared, I'm when it comes to stuff like Trump, and I've been a guy who's followed Trump for a long time. My formative years were in the 80s, and he put out a couple of books. I've bought and read his books to see if I can't tease out stuff that's good, stuff that helps and helps people get momentum going in one direction or another. But I just don't see. And I get folks want an outside of the system guy, but he's not really an outside of the system guy. I mean, he's a dude who has kind of croniated himself enough by ingratiating himself with politics to get what he wants, particularly in the world of eminent domain. And that issue alone is enough for me to have a problem with Trump. But you know what? If you want to hear what I had to say about that, go back, do a search on Donald Trump. And you'll find the show. It's not that old. But what amazes me is sort of the politics that we're in right now. It stuns me, the folks that seem to be getting traction, particularly the Bernie Sanders thing. I don't get that at all. Now, granted, comparing Clinton and Sanders is an interesting challenge for folks on that side of the aisle. But I'll tell you, man, anyone who thinks life's going to get better under a system where government supposedly pays for everything. I don't think everyone understands where government gets their money. They get it from you. And if they just print more, that is yet another tax, right? Because it simply makes the dollar in your pocket not worth as much today as it was yesterday when they print more money. So anyway, and if folks care about that, I mean, this is a real estate show. So in terms of which candidate I think is the one who's most likely to preserve property rights. That's and one of the reasons I like real estate so much is because we're one of those countries that's supposed to respect property rights. And I'm not just talking about owning your own home. I'm talking about all your stuff. So many of the other elements of the Bill of Rights have this fundamental assumption that you're secure in your private papers, right? Well, that's a property thing. That's your property. So someone who has a lot of respect for that iPhone of yours, that's your property. That is your modern day equivalent of your papers. You should be secure in that. There shouldn't be some dude out in the middle of Utah who can read everything on your phone. Those are your private papers, your private documents, right? Anyway, so I'm that guy. I'm the guy who wants to pick someone who is all about private property rights. It's your property, not their property. You should get to do with it what you like. So anyway. Maybe I'll do a show on that if anyone actually wants me to. I'll wait for folks to just jump right on board, tell me they want to hear a show about what I think about who you should vote for. I'm not sure anyone gives a rat patoot on who I think you should vote for. But I sure would love for – here's what I'll say. I would strongly suggest you simply go out and research what these folks are saying because most of it is really bad for you. At every level, from a taxation level, from an interfering with your daily life level, all of this stuff. And if you're someone who's had any problem with overreach of government, if you're someone who believes that the police have done bad things, if you're someone who has problems with anything the government does, remember, whenever these folks are talking about giving the government more rights to do more things, you're talking about putting more power in the hands of those folks. I'm always very confused when a friend of mine who always is complaining about what's going on with the system, then wants to give the system more power to take more money from you. But anyway, so just, I guess, think it through, right? Just like I suggest everyone do in real estate, do your due diligence, do your research. Don't decide to pull the lever for one candidate because that's what the bumper sticker says. Don't do it because that's what dad said. Don't do it because it's the girl you really want to date in chemistry class. Don't do it because that's the person she wants to vote for. Do it because you've actually researched it. Don't do it because you're wearing the Republican jersey or the Democrat jersey. Let's try to get the whole football team mentality out of politics and worry less about policies that the Democrats or Republicans like or don't like, and worry more about marrying yourself to policies first instead of teams first, right? And figure out what ones make sense for you. So that's where I'd leave it, because the bottom line is, it's all about us being educated, right? In order for this whole experiment to work, we all need to educate ourselves on what's going on and what the right choice is for us. So anyway. All right. So let's go ahead and jump in. We've got a little bit of a continuation of what we talked about yesterday in terms of negative rates. This one kind of blows my mind because it's not even us pondering, is she considering it? It's actually her saying it. Let's see here. She's up on Capitol Hill. This, I guess, happened on Thursday, and she's been talking to Capitol Hill, about various things. She's quoted saying, "There's always some chance of recession in any year, but the evidence suggests that expansions don't die of old age." In light of the experience of European countries and others that have gone to negative rates, we're taking a look at them again. Remember, this is her talking today, because we would want to be prepared in the event that we would need to increase accommodation. We haven't finished that evaluation. We need to consider the institutional context and whether they would work well here. It's not automatic. Now, remember, we were talking yesterday about there being a challenge to even the suggestion that the Fed might have the authority to go negative. But she goes on to say, when referring to negative interest rates, we would not take those off the table, but we have work to do to judge whether they would be workable here. And the article goes on, and of course, this is from CNBC, and I'll post a link to this particular article. But the idea that this is something that's seriously in the potential bag of tricks is ridiculously creepy. We talked a little bit about the repercussions the other day. I used the analogy of income taxes, and I actually didn't even go far enough with the analogy of income taxes. Not only were income taxes supposed to be ridiculously small in the single-digit number range, right, the low single-digit number range, it was only supposed to apply to the evil top earners, right? The top 5%, the top 1%, the top 10%. It was only supposed to apply to those folks. And so it took less than 20 years, and I didn't look this up. I know it took less than 20 years, but I seem to recall that it actually took a handful of years, and suddenly everybody was paying a tax of one sort or another in terms of revenue internally, in terms of the IRS. So many folks are saying that this negative interest rate thing, would only negatively affect high depositors, at least when I go and I search on other things. Rest assured that will not last long. Something like this will reach into your pocket anyway, because as these become expenses of large potential organizations, right, because it's going to affect corporations too, well, how do you think they deal with that? They don't simply say, oh, well, gosh, we're losing money on the money we have held in liquid form, so I guess we'll just take that loss. No, they don't. They transfer it on to consumers. So not only do you have inflation working against you, now you have this negative interest rate working against you in items that you consume. So I guess my point is, I'm repeating this again because I want you to get worked up about this. This is one of those things that creeps in and bites you on the butt, and you wonder, how the hell did we get here? And remember, this is a side effect of the belief that the only way to really make things work right is through the interference of the political class, right, or the bureaucratic class. Nobody wants to say, well, we don't want to actually just let the peasants be in charge of the economy through supply and demand and businesses surviving or declining based simply on whether or not the peasants spend their money on that stuff. They want to be able to pick the winners and losers. These are anyway, God, I get it. I'm going in the weeds. I apologize. Just keep an eye on it. Be aware of it. I of course, will constantly try to poke your eyes in that direction whenever it comes up again. But negative interest rates are a bad thing. You can read this article and more. I've talked about negative interest rates before, but just be aware of it because it's something that should scare the hell out of you. The idea, because what happens then is people just start pulling money out of the bank and all you hold is cash, right? And that's a hole that a lot of these European governments have talked about plugging by not even having cash, by abolishing it. So, and that would be a ridiculous level of control that they would have on you and what you can and can't do with money you've earned. It no longer becomes yours, right? When you completely lose control of the currency that you've earned, you're no longer in control of it. And the folks who call the shots in the government are. All right. More interesting data. I tell you, just there's nothing. And I realize this is me. I am a bit of a wonk when it comes to this stuff. But the fact that more people are not just jumping up and down and screaming about the negative interest rate thing boggles my mind. Sorry, it's just bad. All right, I'm gonna move on now. I keep trying to remind myself it's a real estate show, Robert. Just push right through. Housing Wire is sharing some interesting information that gives us a little bit of insight into sort of the psychology of buyers, right? One of the things we try to do here is suss out what's going to happen, what's around the corner, what are the motivations of buyers and sellers. A lot of times when you know that, you can come up with plans in your marketing or in your approach to purchasing something. You can come up with a way to make your offer the most desirable, or make your property the most desirable, so that you can work both ways, right? Well, 45% of non-homeowners, the folks who don't have a house, right, which is what a non-homeowner is. Wow, this is turning out to be ridiculously bad. I almost want to just stop it and start over. I'm not gonna though. I used to do this live, so I'm just gonna go with it. 45% of non-homeowners say finances keep them from buying. And 30% of those folks say they can't afford a down payment. Or at least I think it's 30% of that group. According to the bank rate survey, nearly 30% of all non-homeowners, say they can't afford a down payment. So it's not 30% of the 45%. It's 30% of all non-homeowners. But finances are clearly the number one concern, and one of the biggest concerns is a down payment. Well, okay. That tells you a lot of great information if you're trying to sell or you're trying to buy. What does it tell you? It tells you that other buyers may not be coming up with as much down, right? Now, granted, this is more of a financing thing, so it has less to do with that initial offer. But think about that psychologically, right? So the equivalent of sort of that down payment is the earnest money that you offer, right, up front. So psychologically, maybe we can translate that into an action on the part of the buyer where maybe you offer a little bit more up front. Now, what I typically do when I'm advising my buyers, we try to write up the offer so there's plenty of protections in there for their money that goes into escrow. But in California, you can never lose more than 3% of your money in escrow if the deal falls through. And that would be if it's your fault, right? So let me give you a worst case scenario. You've signed off on all contingencies. It's 3 days to close of escrow, and you as the buyer decide, you know what, I don't want to buy this house. You've signed off on everything. You've signed the loan. It's all set, and you want to back out at the very last second. That would be a situation where you would be expected to give up the monies that you have in escrow. The seller would be able to keep those. But in the state of California, it's limited to 3% of the purchase price. So if your plan is to already come in with 3% of the purchase price as earnest money, feel free to go as much above that as you want. If you're liquid, if you're good with that money, if this is money you've got put aside to be put towards your down payment on the loan anyway, if it's going to end up being as part of your loan anyhow, go ahead and front load it. If you're already doing 3%, either as the initial earnest money deposit or as the combined deposit. One thing that often happens is you'll do an initial earnest money deposit of X amount of dollars, and then when something occurs, you'll increase your earnest money deposit by a certain amount. So the line of logic there would be your offer's being presented. Maybe you come in with $10,000 earnest money. It means if it was a $100,000 house, $3,000 is the most you could lose. But you're doing that $10,000 to try to demonstrate. It's a psychological move. It's a way to demonstrate to the seller how serious you are. So how did we get here? Well, I think that this phenomenon, that the folks who do decide to buy are a little bit more cagey about how much money they put as a down payment. So even though your offer may be the exact same dollar amount as another offer, if you've put more earnest money in up front, which typically on the receiving end, that gets interpreted as a indication of seriousness, right? The realtor who's helping the seller often will express that to a seller. I've seen it happen quite a few times. And so by having that amount being higher than the other guys, that ends up being the deciding factor. So between your offer and another offer that may be identical, the fact that you've come in with a higher earnest money at the front end may work for you. So that's just something to keep in mind. This would tend to lead us into the direction of believing that buyers may be putting less money down as earnest money in a transaction. Now, I realize this is relating specifically to financing, and the amount of down payment is a concern for folks. But finances in general are what are keeping 45% of the folks out of the marketplace. So we have to assume that's translating into even the folks who are participating in terms of their hesitancy. So you may be in a position as a buyer where you can take advantage of that. Now, on the seller side, what's a way you could make this easier? Are there things you could do? Let's say you're in a slightly challenged market. Given the fact that buyers are concerned and the financial part of it concerns them, what if you as the seller were then to offer seller financing for some part of the purchase? Maybe not for the whole thing. I'm sure you need some amount of money out of this to move on to your next property. But what if you were to offer a loan of a certain interest rate for a certain number of years as an option for a buyer? They may not even take advantage of it, but by having that being part of your marketing, that the seller will carry back a note, could be something where you're seen as more attractive as a property because you're offering more flexibility in the terms relating to the property. Now, this, if you're in a marketplace where the sellers are already in the catbird seat and offers are coming left and right and center and everywhere else, clearly you don't need to entice buyers. You're already in that situation. But I know for a fact there's plenty of you out there listening who are not in a market like that, because you tend to email me and ask me interesting questions. I had one today from a listener in Denver, as a matter of fact, where she had I guess there's a lot of challenges in terms of some of the properties, but the rental market's real weak there for some odd reason, which tells me more people are buying than are renting, basically. But the markets are different all over the country, so you need to sort of adapt these strategies to what's going on with you. What else have we got? U.S. home prices shoot up across the U.S. in late 2015. This was kind of interesting, and this is something that was predicted last year. The national median housing prices shot up 6.9% to $222,700 in the fourth quarter of 2015, and that's from a recent National Association of Realtors report. That's up from $208,400 for a single-family home in the last quarter of 2014. So that's a pretty substantial jump. Home buyers in the West, which includes pricey Silicon Valley where I am, and the South saw the biggest price hike, and would-be buyers there are experiencing the worst sticker shock. Four of the most expensive markets in late 2015 were, unsurprisingly, California. San Jose, seat of the tech industry, topped the list with median price of a single-family home at a whopping $940,000. The city was followed by San Francisco at $700. That can't be right. San Jose's average sales price was lower. No, San Jose's average sale price was higher than San Francisco. That can't be right, because that's not what I see on the ground when I do comparisons. Honolulu didn't come cheap at $716,600. Anaheim, Santa Ana came in at $708,700, and San Diego came in at $546,800. There's nothing really sexy here, and we kind of really already covered these numbers. But it's a good thing to know in terms of markets you may want to be looking more into or avoiding. If we think these are things that are sort of hitting their upper limit, I know that in my strategy of getting my next property, I'm done looking through the mainstream market, and I'm working through doing a lot purchase where I then build. So it's a construction loan. So that was what seemed like the best way to get a good deal for my situation. Finally, for today, I thought we'd do a quick rundown on 4 ways your location can boost or bust your home value. This comes to us from Realty Times, and number 1 on their list was being close to schools. I think this is a good one. A lot of it is going to depend on the quality of the school. If you're right near the best school in town, that's going to be a lot better for you than being right next to the worst school in town. So when you're making a purchase, so for you as a buyer, when you're making a purchase, even if kids aren't in the equation for you or your kids are out of the house, don't take your eye off of the school ball, so to speak. You want to try to make a purchase in an area that is served by a good school. And if you can buy a property closer to that school, that's going to work for you as well. It's all about location, right? So that's one of those things that's going to work for you. So it needs to be not just a location evaluation, but also a qualitative one where you look at the quality of the education, and that's information that's relatively easy to find out. Now, on the downside, it may be a deterrent for you to be too close to schools for some buyers. If you're in the path of the school pickup and drop off, where there's lots of traffic created at those times, or you're directly across the street from a playground, which means there's going to be noise throughout the day, you need to understand what challenges might be presented by being close to certain schools. And I know in my local area, the elementary school here called Nordstrom, huge traffic problems in the mornings when folks are dropping off. It's on a street where you're not really directly across the street or any of your own side streets relating to the school. But those are things you're going to want to keep in mind. It's not universally true that even if you're next to a good school, if you're right next to the good school or right across the street from it and you're faced with ridiculous traffic all the time, that's potentially going to work against you. Number 2, being close to area conveniences. So a lot of folks call this the Starbucks effect or maybe the Trader Joe's effect. Being near things that are attractive works for you. Data shows that between 1997 and 2013, homes closer to Starbucks increased in value by 96% compared to 65% for all U.S. homes. So proximity to those things matters a lot to a lot of different people. Now, there's also a new report that shows that proximity to a high-end grocery store, particularly Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, can also raise home values considerably. This may not be something that is true across the country. I can't help but think that a lot of that relates to a weird foo-foo thing that happens here in California. In my area, it's a little bit less so. The Morgan Hill and the San Martin area tend to not, San Martin particularly, tend to be areas where people aren't driven as much by that stuff. But I'll tell you what, folks who are looking to buy in urban, suburban Morgan Hill, more often than not, ask me, where's the Starbucks? What supermarkets are available? And is there a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods? So it clearly matters to some folks. The downside, again, there are types of local amenities that do not boost your value. Adult entertainment, industrial businesses, airports that put you in the flight path, small businesses like tattoo parlors, check cashing, cash advance, pawn shops, things that you might tend to associate with lower income or higher crime areas can turn people off. And that's clearly something that we all know, I think, on some level. I've had plenty of clients where on the way to a property to view, we pass by something where they're all, okay, we don't need to go any further. We don't like this neighborhood, kind of a thing. So be aware of those things. And you know what's interesting is that this also applies to much more suburban areas where you aren't even really within 5 or 6 blocks of any of these things. Just being on a street where, say, everyone has bars on their windows or there's tons of cars parked on the lawn, that type of thing. That's absolutely stuff you don't have any control over that can absolutely have a negative effect on your property values. Being convenient to freeways. So this is one that's really big here. The commute is a number one concern in the community that I serve primarily, which is Morgan Hill. And being able to easily get on and off that freeway is a big selling point. And being 10, 15, 20 minutes away from being able to just get onto the freeway is a big deal, because typically for the typical commute from Morgan Hill up to the north where people are going to Sunnyvale, just to get from where you get onto the freeway to where you're going is typically a 30-minute proposition. So you're adding unpleasant minutes the further you are away from the street. So, and remember, this is going to change depending on where you are. For some areas, it's going to be a bigger deal than others. You need to get a little bit of ground truth to figure out how big of a deal this is. But a location close to major thoroughfares can be a selling point, since it helps homeowners cut down on the dreaded daily commute. My personal thing is I don't like to be more than 5 or 10 minutes away from being able to be on the freeway. In terms of when I'm shopping for folks who are looking to commute, that's typically the number I'm trying to go for. However, you can be too close. You don't want to be the person who's 1 minute away from the freeway, because there's a chance you may end up with a car on the roof of your house at some point. You might be able to hear the noise of the freeway. You're going to be hearing sirens from rescue vehicles and police vehicles traveling on the freeway. So it's definitely something you have to look at in balance. Number 4 on their list, a quiet location, peaceful surroundings. That's what really drew me to my home. We're just 10 or 15 minutes away right from downtown Morgan Hill, but we feel like we're in the mountains up here. So that's something that I was actually looking for. Backing up to nature, close to hiking trails, that is absolutely going to be attractive to a good number of buyers. The downside that there is such thing as too quiet. And not just that, there's the biggest thing I need you to think of if this is something that applies to you, whether you're looking to buy a property of this type or sell a property of this type, is how far are you from the supermarket? If you're more than 15 minutes away, 20 minutes away tops from the supermarket, that's a bad thing. That's going to work against you. So think about that when you're buying. There was a point in my life where I was living way up in the mountains near Auburn, California, in a little town called Cool. Very small town. still to this day had the best Chinese food restaurant of any place I've ever lived. And this was a town with a stop sign and a pizza parlor and a Chinese restaurant, and that was it. In fact, they're still there. I'm toying with road tripping up there just to go have their Chinese food. But in any event, I had to commute all the way into Auburn just to go to the supermarket. So that was a 35-minute trek just to get there. So those are things that can absolutely work against you and things that you want to try to balance. And remember, these are decisions that you should be making before you purchase a property. I want you all to be thinking, how will this affect my ability to sell this property in the future? Even though I personally may feel A-okay with a really long commute just to go pick up a loaf of bread, what are the odds that a large number of buyers are going to want to be in that situation as well? Now, since I moved out of Cool, they have put a supermarket right there in Cool, so yay. And I'm willing to bet that those property values really went up in Cool when that happened, because that was really one of the only downsides to living there. I loved it. All right, folks, I hope that's been helpful. I like to think that all of this information is in some way going to help you make better decisions, or maybe inspire you to look a little bit more into the details of things that you're trying to figure out in the wide, wonderful world of real estate. If you've got anything you'd like to ask, or suggestions you'd like to make, or observations you'd like to share, please feel free to head over to www.therebelbroker.com, click on Contact the Rebel Broker, and you can write out a message, ask whatever you like. I'll be happy to respond, and that's probably the best way to get in contact with me. Of course, if the show, if you're enjoying it and you feel like you're getting something out of it, I would be forever in your debt if you took a few minutes out of your day to write a review, give us a thumbs up, give us some stars, whatever you use to consume the show, just use that tool to give us a review, and I would appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I'll talk to you all next time.